educators. It's Matt Healy here with Educators for Equity. And I just today want to share some resources with you to start framing your thinking for going back to work. It's going to be here before we know it, whether that's going to be e-learning, or virtual, or in person. It's coming up. And that's why we developed the Safe Starts theme and are trying to focus on that so that we can help you kind of frame that thinking to get back. How are we going to be intentional and strategic with our initiatives that we want to bring back to the classroom and in our school communities so that we're making sure that we are leading with equity and anti-racist work, creating inclusive environments for whatever we can do with the virus, at hand. But in order for you to have some concrete ways that you can start planning with your colleagues, I'm going to show you some teaching tolerance resources. I went to a workshop, about a 2-day workshop in Orlando about 2 years ago now with a colleague, and got some really good resources that I still use today at the university level with pre-service teachers as well as with students at the elementary level. All of these resources that I'm going to share are on the website at Teaching Tolerance, and you can download them digitally, but I have some hard copies that I got from the workshop, and at a later date I will break down further each of these resources in other videos if you're interested in seeing how you can implement them further into your classroom and get some guidance with that. So if you're not familiar, Teaching Tolerance was created by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and that is an organization that was created in 1971, and they really pioneered legislation and lawsuits during the civil rights movement, and they're still around today. Teaching Tolerance came about, I think, in the beginning of the 1990s for educators. So they are doing all this work on the law side, and then how can we as educators try to change the narrative based on the lawsuits that they've had to file, and they range from racism, homophobia, all those types of lawsuits that this organization has filed in order to bring some justice and make change. So the first resource I want to show you is, if you could see here, the critical practices. So this guide is great when you're trying to develop your instructional plans. How am I going to use these critical practices for anti-bias education to set up how you're going to teach and how you're going to impact your students in purposeful ways. So the critical practices, they're broken down into sections. And if you can see here, classroom culture, family and community engagement, and teacher leadership. So these critical practices really just help you to define how am I going to establish a positive classroom culture that's inclusive? How am I going to engage with my families? So with the students and their families and stakeholders, so that we have those two-way communication protocols and honoring families. How do we make families feel accepted and important in our classrooms, and so that students also feel as though that they feel included and their families are included no matter what their family looks like. That also goes into teacher leadership. So you as a teacher leader, how are you going to impact not only your students but also your colleagues? So You can find these critical practices online. It gives a great overview. There's 20 critical practices that you can read through, and I'm going to have like I said, a video at a later time and really go through those and see how you break those down. But what you might want to do to start is do an inventory, a self inventory. You can find those types of assessments. They have some on teaching tolerance to see your preparation, where you are and where your school is. So kind of like a needs assessment to see where you are and the work that you want to focus on to make the best impact. The second resource is the Anchor Standards, the social justice standards. So they're broken down into 4 categories: identity, diversity, justice, and action. So these anchor standards for social justice are then broken down out of those 4 domains into developmentally appropriate groups. So these same 20 standards can then be broken down for the K through 2 group, the 3 through 5 group. So it's like they're just scaffolded. And then the 6 through 8 group. So that gives you the full spectrum of the K-12 environment. And if you see here, it's very similar just to your state standards. It has the anchored standard, the code, the outcome, and then a scenario that you can use. Again, these can be found on the website, so you can look just for your specific grade levels. And these are awesome because when you're doing your PLCs or you're planning with just by yourself or with a group, tie in the social justice standards into your lesson plans with your content standards. So that makes it so easy to do that. And then on the website as well, you can find different articles or stories or videos that help you teach that standard and get the outcome, the desired outcome of that standard. 2 more things. This one is called Speak Up at School, How to Respond to Everyday Prejudice, Bias, and Stereotypes. So this is awesome because this helps us feel like we have the power to speak up. It gives us that ownership of these are ways that I can speak up when I know that something is just off, something is said blatantly, or that's offensive, or something that maybe I need to get some of these questioning strategies to say, let's rethink that or rephrase that, or just say that offended me if it impacts you, or that's not the thinking that we can have here at our school. So what I've done when I've done trainings is come up with a bookmark, and this is great because a teacher I pass these out, they can just keep this as a bookmark or by their seat on the carpet, and it's just a really good cheat sheet. But the basic 4 strategies for speaking up when you feel it's important to do so are echo, educate, question, and interrupt. So these are great strategies. Again, it's in this resource, Speak Up at School, for educators on teaching tolerance. And you can read through those 4 different strategies, and they also have scenarios in there. And you can even use this as a professional development, do role playing, and I found it to be really helpful to give us kind of that power and that courage to speak up when we know we need to, and we need to not allow certain things to be said that are harmful to our colleagues, our families, and especially our students, especially we know a lot of these things are what lead to students feeling excluded or being bullied when people don't speak up. The last resource is called Let's Talk, and this one is more centered for the students. So how do we talk about race, racism, other topics with students that's uncomfortable, and we know that we need to speak up and we cannot stay silent as educators. We all know that, and this helps us to create that inclusive culture in our classrooms to allow for these conversations to be had. So, for example, a template that they use for students is reiterate, contemplate, respire, and communicate. And it breaks down, depending on the level, what that looks like, what strategies you can use to have these conversations and make students make sure that they feel safe. So one would be giving different hand signals for how comfortable you are in a discussion, or if you're in a restorative circle, if you're going to use restorative practices. And other strategies for journaling, checking in with students just with their well-being. So it might not always have to be a verbal response. It can be just a thumbs up, a thumbs down. But again, you would teach these to your students. And again, it's just to create a positive and accepting and warm culture in your classroom where students feel safe. So I wanted just to share with you these 4 different tools to center yourself, give you a jumping off point if you feel like you're overwhelmed and you know you want to do all these things, and you've read all these great articles and resources that have been shared in our group. But hopefully these resources from Teaching Tolerance will help you. And again, in the next upcoming weeks, I'll go through them more, just so that if you want to tune back in and see how they can be used and implemented, so that you can hopefully use these tools when you get back to work in a couple weeks. So that's it for now. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that was beneficial for you. Again, keep looking for our weekly Teacher Talk Tuesday videos, and we are coming up with a bunch of other ideas, resources, and giveaways. So just stay tuned.